Welcome to Too Much Music,
a show where two music know-it-alls talk about making music in a world
that probably already has a little too much music in it.
Allow me to introduce Alison. She's an indie hero who's written thousands of songs and can rock a pedal board like nobody's business.
But I also have graduate degrees in music theory and know quite a bit about how the brain processes music. And this here is Greg. He's a legitimate conservatory-trained doctor of music who can conceive of musical sounds that we mere mortals can't even comprehend.
Okay, yeah, but I'm also an old-school 80s goth, and I'm currently living on the road and producing music out of a studio that I built in my RV.
We used to be married.
But now, we just have this podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to our third episode of the Too Much Music podcast. 1, 2, 3. We're happy to be with you today. We're going to get a little personal. Up to now, we've talked more about things outside of our own realms, our own bodies, but today we're going inside. And we're going to talk about our own music and how we make it, why it's awesome, how it can be better. With that, let's get into it.
So, I want to say that this is our third episode, and we have folks who are listening, which is great. And we want to be sure that we are accepting feedback, and we are going to continue making episodes, so we will not burn out. It's on our schedule. I mean, it's literally on our completely obsessive-compulsive schedule. So, yes, we're going to continue to make episodes, so yay for us. This one is different, as Alison said, because we are going to... So, Alison and I are extremely different. We've made that point many times, but we complement each other in so many ways. And except for
the being married part, maybe.
Yeah, certainly. But we work well together. That's why we're still friends. That's why we still work together in lots of different ways. And so my strengths are maybe some of her weaknesses, and her strengths are absolutely some of my weaknesses. So we often work to improve each other, to help each other in a constructive and non-critical way. I think that's a secret to our success, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other half of that is that we know each other so well, after being married for 10 years, that we know each other musically and psychologically. So we can help each other in ways that probably two people very rarely can. And that's a huge,
right.
A huge benefit to both of us, I think.
Yeah. And we do this normally throughout the course of our natural lives. So what we want to do here is open that up, share that a little bit, put that on public display and show how that works, because hopefully you can learn something maybe from each of our weaknesses and how we're trying to tackle that. And that kind of brings us to what we decided to do in the next couple of episodes, which is to make a short series of challenges for each other to, sort of get involved in each other's process just with whatever it is we're working on at the moment individually, and task each other with ways of approaching it to help us break bad habits or grow into new, better habits, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And these challenges that we're presenting to each other come from, like I said, from our knowledge of each other, from our knowledge of each other's musical weaknesses and psychological weaknesses, I would say, which don't always overlap. Yeah. That's an interesting thing that you find over a lifetime of making music, is that, sometimes you have barriers that are completely in your mind, that you have the ability easily to overcome, but you don't for whatever reason. So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to challenge each other to overcome. And I think we're going to start with a challenge that I gave to Greg. So Greg, do you want to maybe introduce this in your way, so that we frame it in a way that makes sense to you?
So as we've heard in the intro and in the previous podcast, go back and check them out. We know that, I am a rigorous composer type. I calculate, I plan and execute and craft and that whatever. That's my sort of approach. That's the approach I've learned to do. But that's not how I got into music at all. And frankly, it's probably the thing I'm least good at naturally. It's what I've learned to do. Spent a lot of years, decades even, honing that set of skills to craft music. But my strongest suit actually is in, in a sense, in improvisation. It's really about, for me, probably my natural strong suit, I should say, is having an idea, feeling where it is, and getting it together and putting it down instantly. Now, this isn't that uncommon. Lots of musicians are like this. But where I have failed, I think, in a lot of ways, is if I'm starting a new project, I will begin by planning, by gathering information, sources, data, influences, and try to start crafting an approach to a project, and maybe not listening to what my inner musical gut is telling me. That may not be my first impulse, because it simply comes so easy to me, frankly. It doesn't feel like a challenge, and it doesn't feel like I'm meeting the project, or giving it my all. So I first want to do the hardest thing I can. And
this is maybe where a little psychology break could come in handy.
Yeah.
You have to identify these things about yourself that are holding you back. And what I have always seen for Greg in many facets of his life, and I think he won't mind me sharing this, is what we're talking about, is that I'm sure I'll get mine, by the way.
It's getting personal. We're getting personal.
Worry.
We're going to get into it.
We're going inside, deep down.
All right, pants are coming off.
Greg has a real struggle with things being easy. He wants
I thought you were going to say hygiene or something. No, okay.
Brushing his teeth. He just doesn't do it. I don't know.
I can do that.
Yeah, he does. He definitely.
Okay.
He brushes his teeth. Anywho, he tends to value things that are difficult. So if something comes easily to him, he feels like, well, this can't be anything. This can't be real. This can't be valuable. This can't mean anything.
It's not worth it.
Yeah, it's not worth it. Which is obviously just not exactly true. That the value of something doesn't really have to do with the difficulty or ease with which it comes at all. Some valuable things are difficult. Some valuable things are easy. So separating that away, separating that out was the reason that I brought this challenge to Greg, because frankly, over the years of me watching him make music, some of the most incredible things from my perspective that he's made over his life before me and, since I've been in his life, have been things that just came out very quickly. And they have a magic to them and a personality to them that I don't necessarily always hear in the super planned stuff. So that was from my perspective where this came from.
There's a good story about that, actually. Years ago, when we started setting up a music studio when we were married in our home, we started to build a music studio, and I was acquiring instruments and sound libraries and things, and I thought, I know what to do. I'm going to just create some random music as experiments, just so that I'm forced to try and use the different libraries so I can get familiar with what they can do, whatnot. And it was just silliness. I had no design. I didn't have there was no project involved. It was just, let's have fun and let's use. So, we began with interior piano effects, move into massive pipe organ mess, and then that just becomes some kind of jazz fusion groove from the 70s with the shakuhachi solo. Like, for real, I'm describing the thing I made, and it was just bizarre. And I made it, and it was just for me. And Alison heard it and said, "What is that? That is amazing."
You know what? I think that we should take a little moment here, because I think we should play a little bit of this for the listeners so they can hear what we're talking about.
Yeah, my most serious work. Here we are. Okay.
Driven by an obsession that it can be done, he is unconcerned with failures of the past or dangers of the future. More power, more risk. His only interest is to prove his theory.
Okay, so there was my sound exploration experiment. It wasn't an experiment. It was just fun. There was no thought. And Alison hears it and says, that's really something. And I thought, you got to be kidding. I mean, it's funny. I think it's fun and playful or whatever, but it didn't do anything for me. And yet, I will say, it opens with some, clarinet and bass clarinet or something. They're playing a hexachord, which is then the aggregate is completed like later. Like, I do fun things like that for me. God. Yeah, I know it's construction, but wait,
drink. He just said the aggregate is completed. If there's a too much music drinking game, that definitely is like a shot.
So the point being that I had my little fun with it, and I think it's ridiculous. And but what Alison pointed out, I think at the time, was this is the most you thing that I've heard you do in years. It just oozes your strangeness and whatever. And, for me, I did it in an afternoon or pretty much a day, an afternoon. And I think her point ultimately here is, to me, and it's your point, so you can, but I think your point to me is that there's a thing that I can capture that is not something I'm going to be able to craft into material that, it's got to happen in its organic way when I'm not thinking about it, when I'm just not caring, when I don't have a plan.
Yeah, so let me introduce aspect 2 of why this challenge, and then I'll tell you exactly what the challenge was, and we'll start looking at the actual music that Greg made. Part 2 of the challenge is that this man right here has a DMA from Eastman in piano performance. Dude can play a piano. I mean, really, really well.
We have a few keyboards here.
Yeah. It's not subtle how much better he is at playing the instrument than, all of us plebes that, normally play. So that said, having a mastery like that is something, I don't know. I know probably most musicians that don't have it, which is most of us, wish that they did. I would love to be able to play like that. So when you combine that true sort of improvisatory mind with the ability to actually play well, you have a very special set of talents. And what I've seen is that, Greg hasn't always used those two things, and certainly not in tandem, when he's writing music. So what I wanted to see was him focus those into a session, basically create something only using those skills instead of...
This was the challenge.
Yeah. So the challenge was...
Yeah, the challenge was no planning, no... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so my challenge to Greg was for him to sit down, open a recording session just to function as a tape machine and nothing else. Have a couple of instruments available, one instrument, whatever, but keyboards. And he would sit down and play something start to finish, out of his mind, just pure improvisation. And it would have, the challenge was it needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It needs to have a form, which comes very naturally to him. I knew that would be no problem. It needs to be a length that you feel like, okay, well, this is the complete piece. So maybe it's 3 minutes, maybe it's 8 minutes. Turned out to be 4 minutes. And that initial improvisation that you do has to serve as the basis for the piece. So you can add things to it. You can take pieces away from the initial thing if you want. You can change the orchestration, but that's the piece. And then when you come in and do more parts, you're still just improvising over the initial part. You're not planning. You're not, sitting down and crafting things. You're just simply playing with the part that you played first. That was the challenge. Does that encapsulate what you did, Greg?
Sure, it does. And here's what I did specifically then. So I just completed work on a music for a play that was premiered in Vermont, in the middle of winter. Kind of a weird challenge, but anyway, it's an amazing play. It's probably the greatest thing I've ever worked on and read. It's just a brilliant play that I hope has a long and wonderful future. But it was such a wonderful thing to work on it. And so, but the way that because of COVID and everything else, the way the production happened, I created music over a long period of time and it got incorporated into the show, but also it turned out there was more music that I wanted to add to the show. So I literally brought my little Jupiter XM keyboard and I would improvise under scenes and play things under scenes where I wanted to add more music and just didn't have the time to do it. So over the course of the show, I would do this each night and developed a sort of a little theme, just a 3-note theme that I played with underneath scenes. And that was my starting point. That's the point here, is that I started. So when I pulled up my patch, I pulled up a, not a great sound, just a patch, layered patch, and began playing my theme and then improvised on it in one take over the, I guess, 4 minutes it turned out to be. So maybe we should pause and listen to a little bit of that.
Yeah, let's
the
listen.
original.
Yeah.
The original thing I did in one pass. Yeah.
Okay, so that was a little bit of the original improvised piece. So there was no addition there. That's just what Greg did from the beginning. So, Greg, when you, first of all, had you done something like this before, and how did it feel to write music this way?
Oh, I certainly have done that since I was a very young child. Yes. Ever since I was playing the piano, this is how I approached. That's how I found my way into composition, actually, would be to do things like this. So, very natural to me to do. Felt great to do it. I didn't think much about it. It just, anyway, and of course, what I find interesting listening back to it is that it's counterpoint. It's 2-voice counterpoint that turns into 3-voice counterpoint and has this sort of overlapping thing that happens in the end. Anyway, but it's just natural counterpoint in my world. That's how my brain thinks musically, and that's what I did. So it felt good. And although when I did it, I just kind of did it, took a breath, left for the evening. I mean, it was night when I did it. So I just turned everything off and whatever, went about my evening. Brushed my teeth for a very long time, let me be clear.
So hold on. You said this is very natural to you, but let's get into that a little bit, because the whole challenge occurred because you don't usually write this way, but you say as a child this was how you were making music. So
that's all I did.
Yeah. So when did you stop, and why did you stop that?
I went to music school.
Uh-oh, back to, what was it, episode 1?
Yeah, back to episode 1, folks.
Yeah.
brush up on the old Too Much Music podcasts. No. I mean, I got intellectually involved. So, the other night I was working with a writer friend of ours on a new project. And anyway, he was talking about his process, and he was saying specifically that he can't, he has to be, what's tricky for him is he has to sort of stay in an unthinking mode, is what he called it. He gets into something and he has to be there for a long time and stay there without really looking back and analyzing and thinking too much. That's where his work comes out best. And I don't know if that's exactly true for me, but essentially that's the process I was employing here, right? And that's what I used to do when I was a kid. And it stopped because I was thirsty and hungry to learn more about how music is constructed, how to make it better, which made me immediately think, well, I've got to analyze this, and that's hard. I'm going to learn the math of how this works and learn, learn how Mahler constructs a symphony so I can do that too.
Well, this is a true success story, though, on all fronts, because although,
Awesome.
it may have taken, let me tell you how. It may have taken you 48 years. So you had this innate talent, I would say, being a very gifted musical child, and you were writing, probably wonderful but childish things. And
I recently, in the last year, had an opportunity to discover some old tapes. Just a little thought. And anyway, I made some digital transfers, and I'll tell you what. What I didn't have was a sense of editing. I did not have a sense of when to stop. Oh my God. I mean, it's fine, but Lord Jesus, that was over 20 minutes ago. Just put it down. Turn the tape off, man.
Well, you were 8, so I think you can forgive yourself.
Well.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay. So you had this thing as a kid. You went to music school, and not just music school. I mean, you went the epic, full throttle.
Academic.
Eastman
applied
DMA.
Academic route.
Yeah. Very difficult and long slog through music school that you did. But in that time, as you said, the amount of knowledge that you gained about how music is put together, how it works, how you might go about crafting things, how you might edit, you got that full education. And so now when you do this, what I hear when I hear that, as you said, first of all, there's good solid counterpoint, which is something, kids don't just do naturally. You have to learn how to craft counterpoint that works. That's something.
Sure.
That's something that you learn in music school. And not only that, the other thing I would point out about this that's so funny to me is that this whole track is just basically this natural example of, unfolding additive synthesis. And what you end up doing is just creating an organ sound with something that started off, as a very small thing. And it's the way that it happened naturally is unbelievable to me, because it really just sounds like somebody's pulling out stops on an organ, but you weren't playing an organ, right? Like you were
played a single patch. And actually, that's interesting. And maybe this is a moment to stop for a word from our sponsor. We have sponsors now.
Oh yeah, we're big time. So
did you know that? Yeah, only took three podcasts, 3 shows, and we're sponsored now. And we will be with different sponsors, right? That's what our assistants have told us. We have.
Yeah, our manager said we're going to have 1 sponsor per week from now on. So we'll take little pauses.
Daddy needs a new pair of shoes. We gotta. Okay, so let's pause for a message.
And now a word from our sponsor.
Boy, oh, boy, oh, boy, oh, aluminium, boy, oh, boy, oh, boy, oh. Gotta get me some foil, foil, foil. Rolls are shiny, foil, foil, foil.
A huge thank you to our sponsor. I mean, they're just so great, and we really appreciate them. And you
Good
should,
stuff.
Definitely get that stuff. Okay, so going back into Greg's piece, I want to hear more about how that additive synth or organ style build happened, because that doesn't feel that feels planned to me. It seems hard to do out of nowhere.
Yeah, it was not planned. It was just what I was doing, and as a natural course of starting with 2 voice counterpoint and adding a 3rd voice and then adding some other voices that temporarily come in. Anyway, that was just naturally how it went. The next step in the challenge for me was to build a track out of this, to build a proper track instead of just the one MIDI file patch. So what I did then is I took that idea and I left all the same notes. I didn't improvise anymore. I left the same notes and then orchestrated it across all of these synthesizers here. I have a lot of really lovely gear and a lot of monosynths too. So I allowed each voice to appear in its way in a monosynth. And so that made the texture, I think, in the final mix version of it, which we'll hear in a minute, that made it much more interesting, much more organ-like even, because of the way that the overtones of the various filters and the patches that I was using, played into it. But in a lot of ways, the original isn't that different from the final mix because it is the same piece of music and it feels similar, but the execution of it is different and certainly more refined and I think more textured, I hope.
Yeah, it absolutely is, but it still has that same basic core idea and the same basic core feeling. So let's pause again and listen to a little bit of the final mix so that you can hear the difference. And I think we'll make these available in some way or other alongside the podcast.
Sure.
So if you want to hear the whole things, you can. But
on YouTube, yeah,
somewhere we'll put a link. There'll be a link.
Okay,
Links
there'll be a
below.
link in the description.
Yeah.
Isn't that what you do? I don't know how podcasts work. I mean, we got sponsors, but I don't know how this works. So
yes, listeners, we were just pointing all over our screens, and you couldn't see it. But it was awesome.
Missed it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's listen.
Yeah, so there it is. The finished version, the finished challenge.
So how did this feel? I mean, was there stuff that you particularly liked or found frustrating about working this way, again, and as it's something that you don't typically do when you're composing?
So it's a good question. So when I'm crafting something my typical way, I get to know it very thoroughly sometimes before really much happens at the keyboard, right? In this case, there's no time for that. I played it, went to bed. I didn't remember much about it until I woke up the next day and looked at it and said, "Oh, okay. Oh, I know what to do here, and this is how I'll arrange it." And so I got to know the piece after I made it. That is so different. And one of the things I think is a little bit of a danger there is when you hear something again and again, you like it just because you're hearing it again and again. But I got to know it, and I did like it pretty well. Like, I didn't hate it, let me say it that way. And I also didn't have a lot of opportunity to judge it, right? As opposed to when you're crafting something from that, you got the construction blocks out, and you are judging at all moments, and you're thinking, well, what if this happens, and what if this happens, and do I like it here? Could we do this? Here's a new possibility. And you try on all this stuff. I didn't have opportunity to do that. I had a thing I already made. I'm sort of stuck with it, so I had to get to know it, and you can't fix it in the mix. But I did have to, so to speak. I had to make the best version it could be of itself. And it was tremendously liberating to do that, but I also got to know a piece of music that fell out of my head, and I didn't hate it, and that's okay. And you know what? If I had hated it, it would be okay too. Yeah. I mean, something I think that's valuable here is you can spend weeks crafting something before you really get into making it. Boy, if you've put that kind of investment into something, first of all, it can't be for TV. Secondly, you know what I mean? It's got to be a project that allows you that space. But boy, you better have done your work well, and because whatever you've just made, you've invested a ton of energy into it, and it better come out pretty great. In this case, if it didn't come out great, I could abandon it. The next day I could wake up and listen to it and say, it doesn't have the thing that I was hoping for, so it goes in the boneyard. Let's leave it. Let's go do something else. I mean, it's really fascinating because it's an efficient way to work.
Basically a no risk investment.
Very low risk.
Yeah.
And a way to get ideas out of you. You do this when you're crafting too, bumping the microphone. You do it when you're crafting. In other words, you have ideas and you throw them out too. I mean, that's part of the process. But here, they already come out of the speakers, or they're moving the air. These ideas are moving the air right there, and you can react to them and do what you will. Anyway, that was a really interesting experience. Good experience. Very good. I need to do this a lot more is what I guess the answer to your question. I mean, I think I need to move to this because frankly, those decades of school, episode 1, check it out. Too Much Music podcast. Should you go to music school? Okay, we've already covered this, but all those decades of learning, they're present in what I do, right? It's not like the 8-year-old me that I heard on tape just rambling on and on and on for 40 minutes or whatever I was doing. I could have a musical thought, express it in 3.5, 4 minutes, whatever. Great. The craft is there enough. It's not miraculous. It's nothing I invented that's brand new. It's not, I'm not pushing the boundaries in that sense, but you don't always have to do that.
So challenge accepted, and I would say a success.
Okay, good. Well, we'll let the listeners decide how much of a success it is.
We decide. We decide.
Success. Yeah, it was success for me. I learned a ton. I really did. And I know now that I need to do this as part of my process, even if I'm constructing something.
Well, that makes me feel good about myself.
Well, good. Oh my goodness. What a positive way to I guess, wrap up the podcast episode. My goodness. Okay, Ooh. Great. We feel good.
Very nice. And with that, we're going to wrap it up for today. We're very excited about the next episode, which is going to be part 2 of our challenge 2-parter.
The Alison edition.
Ooh, mm-hmm. I'll get to do my favorite thing, talk about myself.
Oh my God. You can do it.
Yeah, so this one's going to be a little different. It's about drums. So we're gonna talk about my challenges with drums, which are unique and deep and wide.
You just hit stuff. It's really not a thing.
I don't like to hit things.
It doesn't have to be violent. It's okay.
So we hope you will join us for that, and Yeah, we'll see you on the flip side, and
Until next time,
have a good day. Bye-bye.
bye.